Good evening and welcome, and I'd like to call to order our Lucan Biddulph Council meeting for Tuesday, March the 19th. I would like to acknowledge that I am an ally of Indigenous peoples. The Township of Lucan Biddulph is located on the treaty and traditional territory and ancestral lands of many Indigenous peoples and is covered by several Upper Canada treaties. We recognize and celebrate the contributions of Indigenous communities in our shared cultural heritage. Lucan Biddulph is now home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples and communities that have a unique relationship with the land and its resources and continue to shape the history and economy of our municipality. We recognize the unique role that Indigenous communities have in the development of our community. The contribution from Indigenous communities ensure the sharing of unique perspectives and traditional knowledge. The township recognizes the importance of consulting with our Indigenous neighbors and communities in an effort to build constructive, cooperative relationships through meaningful engagement to inform our decision-making and to build partnerships. We acknowledge historic and ongoing injustices that Indigenous peoples endure in Canada, and we affirm our commitment to honoring Indigenous voices, nations, and cultures, and to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect. We have 3 items that have been added to the agenda since it was posted. Item 16.3 is a motion that we'll discuss at the end of the meeting when it's at motions. It has to do with the Whitfield Drain Engineer. Item 12.1A, and it's a new report from Ron's office. And item 17.2, and it is a bylaw that Dan will speak to during his report. Are there any disclosure of pecuniary interests? Okay, seeing none. So later this week on March 21st, we will be recognizing International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. This day recognizes that injustices fueled by racial discrimination take place every day, and that we all have a role to play in combating racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. While we have made tremendous efforts to fight racism and injustice, many members of our community still experience discrimination and hate based on the color of their skin, background, or their faith. I had the honor of attending the annual London and Middlesex Local Immigration Partnership All Are Welcome event earlier in March. And it cannot be lost on any of us here in this room today, in this moment, that we all have a responsibility to ensure that every day we do our best to call out discrimination and to ensure our community is open and accessible to all. As our community continues to grow and become more diverse, it is important to note, but somewhat troubling that in 2024, it must be stated, that Lucan Biddulph remains committed to fostering an environment where every individual is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of race or ethnicity. The principles of equity and the fight against racism are fundamental to the fabric of our society. Lucan Biddulph proudly aligns itself with these principles and acknowledges the importance of actively combating discrimination in all of its forms. We do not need to go into closed session, but we do need to enter public meetings. And the first few items on our agenda will be dealt with as we sit as the Committee of Adjustment. So I would ask for a mover and a seconder to adjourn our regular meeting at 5 minutes after 6, and so that we can sit as the Committee of Adjustment under the Planning Act. Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. So the first application in front of us is PL-02-2024, and it's with a property on the Granton Line 34042. It's a minor variance application. And Dan, at this time, I will turn it over to you.
Through the chair to members of the committee, thanks. Great to see you tonight. For everyone that doesn't know me, my name is Dan Fitzgerald. I'm a planner with Middlesex County. I provide professional planning services here to Lucan Biddulph Township Council. So tonight, the first application on the agenda is application minor variance A1 2024. The purpose and effect of this application is to permit the construction of an accessory building with a maximum height of 5.1 meters. Whereas the bylaw currently permits a maximum height of 4.5 meters. The subject property is approximately 2.01 acres, and it is situated in an agricultural area. It's located on the east side of Granton Line, north of the intersection of Observatory Drive and Granton Line, and it is municipally addressed 34042 Granton Line. It is occupied by an existing single unit dwelling, as well as one accessory structure. The property is designated agricultural under the official plan, and it's zoned rural residential or RR zone in the zoning bylaw. This zone does allow and permit single unit dwellings as well as their associated accessory structures. The lands are predominantly surrounded by agricultural lands used for crop production on all sides. The applicant again is proposing to construct an accessory building, which would be located in the south interior side yard behind the existing single detached dwelling. The requested increase in height has been reviewed against the Planning Act tests, and in review of the proposed height, I would note that it does meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act, as the increase generally is not anticipated to have a negative impact on adjacent properties. It is considered minor in nature, and it does meet the intent of both the official plan and zoning bylaw, and generally is considered appropriate development of the lands. So thank you. I am recommending approval, and I'll be very happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thanks for that, Dan. Are there any questions or comments on this application? Okay, and I don't believe that the applicant is here. I don't believe anybody from the public wants to speak to this application. If there's no discussion on it, we do have a recommended motion in front of us, and that is that application for minor variance A-1/2024 filed by David Seaton for relief from the Township of Lucan Biddulph Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw to permit the construction of an accessory building at a maximum height of 5.1 meters for a property legally described as part of Lot 29, Concession 13 South, Part 2 on Reference Plan 33R 478 in the Township of Lucan Biddulph, County of Middlesex, and municipally known as 34042 Granton Line be granted. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Regan and Councillor Hodgins, all in favor, and that's carried. Okay, the next application PL-03-2024, and this is for a property at 34851, Coursey Line. This is a consent application. And again, Dan, I'll hand it over to you.
Through the chair, so the purpose and effect of this consent for a minor boundary adjustment being application number B1/2024 is to sever and convey a 0.6 acre portion of land from an existing farm parcel to be consolidated with the abutting residential lands. And the effect as described would be to increase the size of the parcel to permit access to an auxiliary structure located at the back of the residential property and provide additional area for the homeowner to operate the existing home occupation. So the subject lands is a 98.88 acre parcel or 40 hectares, and it is situated on the west side of Coursey Line, north of the intersection at McGilvery Drive and Coursey. It currently contains an existing single detached dwelling, as well as an agricultural structure and farmland which is in crop production. The neighboring land, which is requesting the lot addition, is approximately 3 acres in size and does maintain an existing single detached dwelling, as well as various accessory structures located across the basically rear of the property. On the map, the lands shown in red here would be transferred from the farm to the residential property. So it just kind of gives you a visual idea as to what that would look like. Planning has reviewed the request against the provincial policy statement, as well as the county official plan and township official plan. So generally speaking, the provincial policy statement permits boundary adjustments in agricultural areas but only in instances where there is a demonstrated technical need. Similarly, the county official plan and township official plan also reflect the same policy basis. It is noted that the PPS County OP and Township OP generally do promote the protection of agricultural land, and they do discourage the loss to residential activities unless within an identified settlement growth area. The County OP and Township OP also require a minimum farm parcel size of 40 hectares. So in this particular case, the application is as presented would result in a direct loss of potentially productive agricultural lands. So planning does note the following concerns, which were listed in the planning report. The first being that the test for the adjustment, that being for technical reasons, generally is not satisfied in planning's opinion. The second being the reduction in farmland would make the parcel size non-compliant with the existing zoning bylaw, as well as the county OP criteria for size and the Lucan Biddulph's OP criteria for size. And the third, in discussion with the applicant, they noted that the intent of the increase generally is due to the operation of an existing business on the property. Home occupations are limited in scope to 70 square meters within accessory buildings and 100 square meters outside. So given the size limitation, it's unclear to planning why 0.6 acres is required, given that the limitation of the home occupation limitation of size is 100 square meters for exterior. So given the above, I am recommending denial of consent application V1 2024, and I'm certainly available to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. I know that the applicant is here. Mr. Finch, did you want to speak to the application? Okay, if you want to come up and sit at where you're sitting and just turn the mic on, it's just the button at the base of the mic.
Thank you for taking the time to review this application. Thank you to Dan and the members of the council that were able to come out and conduct a site visit. I do understand where Dan's coming from a policy perspective. However, I do hope that council can see that this application will not change the historical or current use of this parcel of land. I don't believe my ask will set any new precedents, and I hope that council can be accepting of this application. I am available for any questions, and thank you for your time.
Okay, thanks for that, Adam. Are there any questions of Dan or the applicant on this report in front of us, application in front of us? Deputy Mayor Manders.
Sorry, I guess I don't have a question for the two of them, but I got a comment. Do you want me to wait on that or? Oh, yeah, I wasn't sure if you were doing a secondary thing. I don't have I'll make a comment on it and yeah. I guess my only comment is the went to the property and seen it, and I guess when I look at the boundary adjustments and egg land use on the policy comments, I think that's why we're probably here as council to balance the policy and to think of potential ways of this could be allowed. But I will speak to it. There certainly is no growing product, and as you can see from the picture, the silo in the barn historically used to be there. That's we'll call it a gravel parking lot now. And as far as boundary adjustments goes, I mean, after seeing potentially where it would just be not feasible to move the septic system and all the trees that have to be removed would be not very environmentally friendly and probably cost prohibitive. So I can see why the ask is there. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Westman and then Councillor Reagan.
Yeah, I guess my question's for Dan through you, Madam Mayor. So I kind of get the policy and all that, but I mean, there's a lot more at work here, and I think from my own curiosity, I'm wondering what would it take to make this, like, what would have to be adjusted to make this more in keeping with the policy statement and make it possible? Because I mean, ultimately, we want to maintain businesses in our community. We want to be like, this business employs a lot of people, and we want to make sure that stays viable, right? So I'm just curious, what would it take?
Yeah, so through the chair to Councillor Westman. So when we look at specifically in agricultural areas, the provincial policy, the county official plan, as well as the township's official plan, generally are very restrictive for consents, boundary adjustments. Because at the end of the day, the goal is to maintain agricultural land for agricultural production. And it's to stop, uses that aren't agriculture related from establishing themselves on properties. So when we look at these types of situations, the language does exist to allow for boundary adjustments within these areas, but it's specifically for what's referred to a technical reason. So technical reasons generally are interpreted to be situations where there may be some type of specific site characteristic, which would limit the existing operation of the residential structure or whatever it might be. A good example of that would be a traditional severance where they didn't account for a septic contingency area. Septic system has failed. They can no longer establish a new septic system on that property. So they ask for an adjustment to allow for that space to establish that new system. I've seen that before, specifically, one that I've dealt with. When you're looking at situations of access, I could see a technical need of access to the back of this property. I understand there's development constraints from how it was originally developed. With the location of the septic bed, the accessory building being located at the rear of the property, the existing mature trees and whatnot that do exist here. But in terms of, if it was me from my planning position and opinion on this, that expansion would just be limited to an access, not to an additional space at the back for parking or whatever else it might be. So what would be accessed? Well, generally speaking, our bylaw would consider 6 meters as an appropriate width for an access. So if you're to say, what is from a planning perspective, what is the technical reason? What's the need? To me, the technical need is access to the back of the property. So adjusting it to allow for that access to that back rear accessory structure, maybe it may meet that test for appropriateness. So I guess that would be my answer.
Any follow-up, Councillor Westman? You can come back to it if you want after.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Regan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Dan, for the report. So I too, I went out and did a site visit as well. I think it's one of those cases where council has some leeway and latitude with respect to this. So from my understanding correctly, sort of the historical or present use is not altered by that. And the options, any other, I guess, alternative to access would be removal of, 100-year-old trees and ripping up of the septic system. So I don't know if that is a viable option or not to me. Anyway, that's my understanding anyway. But I do think that in this case, I think that council has the latitude and leeway to perhaps grant this. This is probably where I'm leading. I was out there. I did see and again, my thing too was that the historical use, there was a barn, I believe, in a silo. The picture was up there, the barn in the silo. So there actually hasn't been used to grow crops. And I believe that has been used as sort of a part of that business. It's been used there, I think, for 13 or 14 years. I'm not sure. So I think that historically, I think it's historically been established. And I don't think we're setting a precedent here either as well with that. Those are just my comments. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other comments or Councillor Hodgins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If possible, could we pull up the location map on the screen just to look at? I guess my question is about the concern about the loss of agricultural lands, and is there an opportunity or has it been evaluated any opportunity for I guess a land swap, like adding the agricultural land to the parcel, taking some land from the residential lot to make it agricultural? I think in our next report that we're going to be reviewing, we're seeing that same land swap where they're adding to the residential, but then they're offsetting it by giving land back to the agricultural. So Has that been considered? And maybe it would be a portion of the front lawn there. It would change the shape of the residential parcel, but at least is that being considered just to offset the loss of agricultural land?
Yeah, so through the chair, all I could do is comment on what was provided in terms of an application. So the applicant did not present that as part of their application. But from my own personal perspective or opinion, I guess, professional planning opinion, the access to that property is on that north side to get in and back to where that location is. So I'm not sure, and certainly the applicant could speak to that, but I'm not sure they would be willing or want to give up a portion of that land. And then secondly, I'm not sure giving up that land really creates a viable portion of the farmland at the end of the day.
Yeah, just to follow up through you, Madam Mayor, maybe to the applicant, and is that something that you would consider, like, again, looking at the, I know we're getting ahead, but looking at the other file that we'll be looking at next, you can see clearly, the agricultural field kind of pushing into that laneway. So, and I was, sorry, and to Dan, I guess I was referring to the south portion of the property, maybe having the field go in there, but maybe to the applicant, if I may.
Yeah, if you can go back to that overhead view. So along the north side, there's two laneways. So that property line splits the two laneways. So coming in from the north isn't an option. The south side has overhead hydro all the way back, and there's also the main gas. So like, I don't think they personally want that as farmland. And I don't think that they could operate around those hydro poles running back.
Okay, thank you. Just maybe and then a comment. And Dan, thanks for the additional comments there. I guess. Yeah, we're talking about 118 feet, I guess, here of to be added, but I guess it's interesting to Dan's comments about, I guess, the technical warrant and maybe 6 meters would satisfy the access requirement. So it is a little bit more. So I guess that makes it a bit more challenging as we consider this. I'll just leave my comments at that.
Okay, thank you very much. I will chime in. I also took a site visit to see what we were looking at. And while it is agricultural land, I don't believe that it's ever been real viable agricultural land in the last number of years. And I think it would, and I know nothing, but certainly in looking at it and seeing how it's been used over a great period of time, I think it would take some work to get it back to viable and really productive agricultural land. But that's just me and my not knowing anything about agriculture. But I wondered, though, the one question I did have, Dan, because you talk about the size criteria. So conveying it from the one parcel to 34851 then makes 34863 smaller than what we like to see. By how much?
So through the chair. Yeah, so I believe it's 0.4 is what the deficiency to the agricultural parcel would be.
Okay, and in the event that we grant the application, there doesn't have to be any sort of OP amendment to that. It just, or anything like that, because it falls within, it would be smaller than what we recognize.
So through the chair, it would so if the application was granted, which then reduced the size of the agricultural parcel to not comply with the zoning, the applicant would be required to apply for something like a minor variance to permit that reduction. So through that process, there would be a separate review of the official plan as one of the tests of a minor variance as to whether or not it complies. I'm off the top of my head, I don't I know the county official plan says generally 40 acres. It provides a little bit of leeway. Off the top of my head, I cannot remember if Lucan's does the same.
And in the event, just listening to the comments from my colleagues around the horseshoe, in the event that council was in favor of granting the application, would there be further conditions that would be required on the applicant?
Yeah, so through the chair, generally speaking, through the township, we have generalized conditions that we would apply to consents, and that just deals with the legal technical aspects that occur through transferring properties and deeds and titles and things that you have to do. So there are a number of different conditions which we would apply generally to these consents. As an addition to those general conditions, there would have to also be a condition that would deal with the zoning component of the remnant farm parcel.
I guess certainly, were you aware of that? That there would be conditions put on the application if we were to grant it?
Yes, I was.
Okay, okay. Because certainly I am in the same sort of thought as what I've been hearing around the horseshoe. Councillor Westman, did you have anything else to add?
No, just to reiterate that the current use and condition and historical use and condition of that subject area has not been agriculture. It's not been productive, and from my experience, it would take a very costly amount of time and energy and money to make it productive. So I don't know what can be gained here. I mean, the agricultural portion, it is possible that the operators of the agricultural lands would never use that land because it would cost so much money to get it into production. It wouldn't be worth their time. So I'm just saying that it's probably not, it would be a moot point to even have it there. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other further comments or clarifications? Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a clarification and or maybe a question. So should we go ahead with this and approve it with the area as shown? There's currently a connection to the neighboring property's driveway. So my question would be, would that be disconnected so that the access is contained to the 34851 parcel? Would that be a condition? Just, I guess, prevent this property to property kind of double access situation?
Is there I guess there is at the back.
Yeah, so through the chair to Councillor Hodgins, being out on the property myself, and maybe the applicant can speak to this, I believe it is separated. But the applicant can maybe speak to that.
Right now, there is access from each laneway. That picture is an older picture. There's actually a agricultural building on the north side. That's kind of right at the end of the north laneway. But I do think it would be agreed upon by both neighbors if the access from one to the other was eliminated somehow. I don't think that condition would be an issue for either party.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Manders.
No, again, after seeing it, I do not feel we're eliminating any agricultural property by doing this. I would like to make a motion that we accept the application with the conditions Dan's laid out. So.
Okay. Sorry, I was just talking to everyone. So you want to make a motion to
accept the application.
to grant the
Grant the
application
application with the conditions that
with the
land laid out.
conditions? Okay, so, did you want to go over the conditions, Dan, or do you want me to? Just, I think, okay, all right. I've got them in front of me, so I'll read them. And then I'll ask for the seconder, on that. Is there, would there need to be one added about the laneway access or? Maybe,
So through the chair, generally speaking, when it comes to these types of consents, for agricultural lands, more so thinking about a surplus dwelling severance,
right,
we usually do include a standard condition that says removal of access between the two parcels. So if council, or sorry, if committee wanted to, they could add another condition that stated that access between the two parcels be removed to the satisfaction of the township.
all right, so there's a number of there's a number of conditions that would be put on it. So I will read them. That the certificate of consent under section 53, section 42 of the Planning Act shall be given within 2 years of the date of the notice of the decision. The request for the certificate of consent shall be accompanied by a written submission that details how each of the conditions of severance has been fulfilled. That applicable property taxes, municipal fees, and charges to be paid to the township prior to the stamping of the deeds. That if required, all outstanding work orders or bylaw enforcement issues be resolved to the satisfaction of the CBO prior to the stamping of the deeds. That the applicant's solicitor submits an undertaking in a form satisfactory to the Secretary Treasurer to register an electronic transfer of title consistent with the acknowledgement and direction and the decision of the Committee of Adjustment. That the owner's solicitor provide a transfer in preparation to the municipality together with a deposited reference plan and a schedule describing the land to be transferred for each parcel for the purposes of the issuance of a certificate of consent. That the lands being transferred be rezoned to reflect the new parcel boundaries. That a draft reference plan be prepared by an Ontario land surveyor for the purposes of facilitating the transaction of consent B-1/2024, and that this plan be approved by the township prior to being deposited within the land registry office. That the lands to be adjusted to be severed and merged in the same name and title as the adjacent properties receiving lands as a result of the adjustment, and that subsection 53 or 5 of the Planning Act apply to any subsequent conveyance involving the enlarged parcel, and that any mortgages that may be required take into the account the parcel as enlarged. That the retained farmlands be required to apply for and successfully obtain a minor variance to permit the reduced lot area as a result of the boundary adjustment. And then we'll add the access to the two properties as Dan laid out, to be removed to the satisfaction of the municipality. So if the committee and Deputy Mayor Manders is okay with those, the motion on the floor is to grant the application subject to these conditions, and a seconder with Councillor Regan.
Just had a question, sorry.
Yep, yep,
Madam Mayor, if I may, just had a
absolutely.
question.
Yep.
Sorry. So, then I will second. So the access to lane, just to Councillor Hodgins' point, I'm just not following that one. If that laneway's there and both parties are okay with it, does that need to be a condition? I'm just not clear on that. If I may be wrong, but if both parties say, yeah, we're okay with that, does it make a difference? Do we need that as a condition? It just struck me as odd that they would have to limit that laneway. So I guess my question is for Dan.
That's almost a neighbor versus neighbor thing.
Okay.
And,
Okay, all right, fair enough.
but I don't know, again, I'm not the planner, but that condition would clean it up in the event that they aren't neighbors anymore,
Gotcha.
right?
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
But then the flip side is either neighbor could today, anytime, at least they could put an end to it anyway, like, if they don't want, I mean, yeah, it doesn't. I don't see it being, but I like. Yeah, kind of a mute point. I don't, yeah. I don't.
Well, that would be a discussion then for council if you want to include that motion, if you want to include that condition.
But I guess I made the motion out, if Councillor Hodgson is asking for a friendly amendment to it and wants to stick by his grounds on that and not, and is not willing to support it without that, then if that's what he's asking me, so.
So I just, and I'd look to our staff for a recommendation, whether it's required or not. Like I guess the reason that this became a thing in the first place is that the access to the shed at the rear of the property was through the neighbors, was through the other property. So that's what kind of led to this in the first place. I'm thinking it's just cleaner that, this property has an access and this property has an access. And when it's a shared situation, like without an agreement, I just think it kind of leads to these sort of situations. So to me, I thought it was just, maybe that would be more of a standard condition, but I'd maybe look to our planner and our staff as to whether it's required or not. I'm fine either way.
I think you each have your own driveway, and it's not until the back that it becomes kind of that shared area where both of them, right by that new agricultural.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So they each have their own driveway. It's just at the back where they can access it.
But yeah, I just want to confirm this, I believe both can maintain on their properties at all times with their vehicles.
Correct. If this is approved, yes.
Yes, yeah, if this is approved as is, it's just a matter of, instead of having a strip of grass, which would, I assume, conform if you a strip of grass or lay down some sod, but both vehicles can maintain, both, that's why it caught me off guard. Both are independent properties after passing this. That's all. Yeah, they do not need to get through each other's property in order to enter or exit their property. That's, yeah. But again, if that's a condition that we'll go back to what I said. Yeah, that's.
So through the chair, I think we're kind of dancing around here, but what I'm hearing from the applicant, he's more than willing to do that. And if I could get Lisa to put up the other drawing on the screen, I think the one picture shows it very well. There was another attachment with more pictures. Actually, Ariel, I think it's on there. Yeah. Okay, so if you go down to the second one right there, so you can see this area right here. So all we're talking about is basically an area from here to here, correct, Adam?
Correct.
Yeah. So if, I look at this as kind of like a good fence. Good fences make good neighbors. All I think he has to do to satisfy this condition, if the condition is what the committee puts in the motion, is just to rip this up and make it. And it's separate. This laneway services this property, this existing laneway services that property, everybody's. Right?
Okay, so I will go to you, Deputy Mayor, that you're making the motion. So you decide whether or not you
Oh,
want to include it.
That can be maintained in the motion. Yeah.
The
Condition
the
of
condition of the driveway.
of the driveway to the satisfaction. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And Councillor Regan, you're seconding it. Is there any further questions or comments on this? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. And then I assume, Dan, you'll be in touch with Adam, or Adam, you'll follow up accordingly.
Yep.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Thank you very much. Oh yeah, just set the mic off. Thanks. The next application in front of us is PL-04-2024, and this is for a property at 34,700 Stonehouse Line, and it's a consent application. And Dan, I will turn this one over to you as well.
So through the chair, application for consent for a boundary adjustment, which is file number B2/2024. The purpose and effect of this is to convey a parcel of land for lot addition purposes, having an area of approximately 794 square meters, which would be merged with the abutting lot known municipally as 34700 Stonehouse Line. The property at 34700 Stonehouse Line would then convey a parcel of land for lot addition purposes having an area of 794 square meters, or the exact same amount, to the lot municipally known as 7627 Breen Drive. So the lots would effectively trade the exact same area in land between the two parcels to regularize the existing property lines. So both parcels would in effect remain the exact same existing size. And then the effect of the boundary adjustment is to fix a property boundary due to the placement of a detached accessory structure on the neighboring lands. So the subject land is approximately 5.5 acres. And it's a parcel which is situated on the southeast corner of the intersection of Stonehouse and Breen Drive. It currently contains an existing single detached dwelling as well as residential accessory buildings and some crop that's in agricultural production. The neighboring parcel is approximately 94.5 acres, which is solely used as agricultural lands and crop production. And as previously indicated in the reports, the applicant is seeking to adjust these boundaries to legalize an existing accessory structure. The consent would transfer the exact same amount of land between the two parcels. So the PPS County OP and the Township OP generally permit boundary adjustments in agricultural areas for technical reasons. Planning is satisfied that the request in this case would represent a technical reason for the transfer, and that no net agricultural lands would be removed due to a net zero transfer between the two parcels. So therefore, I am recommending approval of consent file B2/2024, subject to the conditions that have been outlined in the planning report. So thank you, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. The applicant is here and they'll speak if there's any questions or comments that are directed to them. But does council or does the committee have any questions or need any clarifications on this application in front of us? Nope. Okay, then you do have a recommended motion that the applications for consent B-2/20/2024 filed by Rebecca Shoebottom and Shane Shear in order to permit the adjustment of a boundary by conveying 794.27 square meters from each parcel and adding it to the neighboring parcel so as to have no net decrease or increase in land area between the lots legally described as part of Lot 21, Concession 11 in the Township of Lucan Biddulph, County of Middlesex be granted, subject to the following conditions. They're the same conditions that we added to the previous application with the exception of the driveway condition. So I won't read all those, and they have been published on the agenda. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Hodgins and Councillor Westman. Mm-hmm. It is a big difference. That's what I was thinking when I read it. I thought, oh. Okay.
Yes, so through the chair, yeah, you can just amend the recommendation to say square feet as opposed to square meters. When reading the application form, it lists everything in meters, so I can see the confusion.
Gotcha. Understood. Understood. All right, so we will amend that to 794.27 square feet. It's a good thing you were here. And with I said Councillor Hodgins and Councillor Westman as movers and seconders. And Dan, another comment? So in Dan, in attachment number 2, in what the applicant provided, it does say square feet in handwritten. Pardon me? Oh, yeah. Okay. All right, now that we are clear on that, so that motion again was made by Councillor Hodgins and seconded by Councillor Westman. Any further comments? One last call for further comments. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, we do have to rise from our public meeting at 6:48. And we will be conveying a, we're rising from our committee meeting and going into a public meeting at 6:48. And again, this is under the Planning Act. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Regan and Councillor Westman. All in favor, and that's carried. The next application in front of us is a zoning bylaw amendment application, and this is PL-05-2024, and this is for an address at 108 Main Street. Dan.
Through the chair, thanks, Madam Mayor, members of council. So application Z 1/2024. The purpose and effect of the application for this particular zoning bylaw amendment is to temporarily permit 2 single detached dwellings on the same parcel of land. So the applicant in this case is requesting to maintain the existing dwelling on the parcel while a new dwelling is being constructed. Following the completion of the new build or new dwelling, the owner would then be required to remove the original from the parcel within the required 6 months of occupancy period. So the lands are located at 108 Main Street in Lucan, on the north side of Main Street and east of the intersection at Saintsbury and Richmond. They maintain an existing single detached dwelling as well as an existing accessory structure. The proposed new home would be located north of the existing dwelling behind the existing accessory structure. Staff have reviewed the proposal against the provincial policy statement as well as the county's official plan and the township's official plan. I don't have any concerns. As a condition of the temporary use, the applicant will be required to enter into an agreement which would ensure the existing dwelling is removed and a security deposit would be required to be posted as well. So given the reasons in the report, I am recommending approval of the temporary use zoning bylaw amendment. Again, subject to the applicant entering into that agreement and posting the security deposit, which would ensure the removal of the original dwelling. Thank you.
Okay, the applicant is here and is available for any questions should we have any as a council. Are there any questions or comments on this application? Okay, seeing none, then you do have a recommended motion in front of you. What's that? Sorry. I know that there's people in the members of the public here in support of the application. Did anybody want to speak to it? Okay. And okay, So the motion in front of us is that the zoning bylaw amendment application Z-1/2024 for a temporary use zone filed by Teresa Vanderkant to permit 2 single detached dwellings on the property for up to 3 years to allow a new residence to be constructed on the land known as 108 Main Street be approved, and further that the owner be required to enter into a new temporary use agreement with the township and submit a deposit to ensure the removal of the existing dwelling. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Regan. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. And with that, I would ask for a mover and a seconder to adjourn our public meeting at 6:52 and reconvene our regular meeting. Councillor Regan and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. This ends the planning portion of our meeting. If you want, you're more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. We've got an interesting delegation from Upper Thames, but certainly you're welcome to leave at this point too, if you like. Okay. Yep. Yours was the first one up. No, yours was the first one up and it was approved. So. Okay. I know, that's right. Now you should stay. All right. Have a good night. Okay. So we do have a delegation tonight and I am pleased to be able to welcome our friends from Upper Thames to bring us an update on the Medway Creek project. And I'm happy to welcome Titania Lozier to us to join us this evening. We are all very familiar with this project and we haven't had an update on it in a while. So it is great to have one and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Well, thank you to council for having me here tonight. Yeah, my name is Tatiana Lozier. I'm the Stewardship Services Coordinator for the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority. If you want to move to the next slide, please. Yeah, so starting with the Upper Medway. So it is a project that paired water quality monitoring with BMP adoption. So looking at year-round event-based sampling at the headwaters of the Medway Creek. So that's everything above observatory line. Looking at targeting BMP adoption, and it was implemented under a series of programs, I'll call them, starting in 2015. I've listed them all there, and I'll walk through, I'll say the evolution of the Upper Medway, if you will. So on the next slide there, it started with, I'll say, maybe like a shotgun approach of BMP adoption. So if we can implement BMPs across the Upper Medway, can we make an impact on water quality? So there was funding for anything from erosion control structures to tillage equipment, to cover crops, to tree planting. And it was a wide variety of BMPs because this project was complementing broader efforts with the Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association and the funding that was available across the Lake Erie Basin for farmers to adopt practices. And so I'll say the random acts of stewardship or the shotgun approach is really reflective of how we do stewardship across the watershed as well. And I won't get too much into the details here because really the takeaway from this approach was that if we want to look at impacts on water quality, we need to be a bit targeted in how we approach stewardship adoption. So on the next slide, in 2018, kind of took lessons learned, I'll say, from the shotgun approach and evolved it into looking at just cover crop adoption. And this was really based off of 2 questions, I'll say. What practice can be implemented broadly across all farm fields? And then what practice gives landowners and the environment, I'll say, like the best bang for your buck? The best value to reduce sediment and nutrient losses. And so the Upper Medway was divided into 2 sub-watersheds. And this was really based off of participation under the previous project. Many of the landowners on the west half uptake we're uptaking the program and implementing stewardship practices compared to the east half. So it kind of just allowed itself to be a natural border, I'll say, to implement the cover crop project. And so the figures that you're looking at there is everything from 2018 to 2022. In terms of adoption, we had a goal of reaching 75% over winter cover by year 4. We hit that goal in year 2 and we continued it through to year 4. And that's really a testament, I'll say, to the farmers in the sub-watershed. My colleague and I sat down with each of them to inform what we wanted to do, what we wanted to achieve, and how we were going to do that. So we took the bulk of the financial risk away by offering incentives or cost share dollars for cover crops. So it was about $250,000 in cover crop funding just for the Upper Medway through the 4 years of this program. And I'll say this project was successful in terms of BMP adoption, but when we actually look at the water quality differences between the two halves, it's actually contributing pretty equally to the outlet of the Upper Medway. So the purpose was to look at the implementation of cover crops on water quality, but I think the takeaway from the project itself is equally as important. So you can move to the next slide, thanks. So we inherently know that cover crops reduce erosion. They build soil health over the long term at the field scale. And in the time frame of the project that we're researching the impact on water quality, that doesn't really translate into the sub-watershed scale because it's so complex. So the benefits almost get diluted when you're looking at the sub-watershed scale. And research has indicated there is a bit of a lag period often between BMP adoption and actually seeing improvements in water quality. So I just don't think we were within that timeline. And we knew going into this project that that was a potential. So we were looking for other opportunities to enhance this project. So alongside this, we were aiming to answer a question that came from a lot of the landowners that we are working with, and looking at the impact of the cover crop on crop yield. And so the benefits being promoted of cover crops can potentially increase crop yield. And we had done a number of research trials through check strips and check blocks, looking at different parameters such as soil temperature, soil moisture, between where there was and wasn't a cover crop across multiple fields across the multiple years. And we did not see an increase in crop yield, but almost as importantly, we also did not see any crop yield decrease. So I think that's almost as important messaging as potentially seeing any kind of increase. So on the next one. So when we look at water quality, and I'll kind of go back to the outlet as a whole, the Upper Medway as a whole, it's really, I'll say easy, but it is quite a complicated process to look at the biggest contributors in terms of events on nutrient loading. In particular, I have pulled the top 4, I'll say, total phosphorus loading events. So phosphorus being a nutrient of concern in the Thames River and Lake Erie. And really just to highlight here is it's over the course of a year or several years or a season, it's a handful of events that are contributing to the most phosphorus loss. So these like 1 to 2 to 3 day events can contribute almost a third of the annual loading. And typically it's during the non-growing season, so when fields are typically bare. And that's why the promotion and adoption of practices that can work to reduce water volumes, erosion, nutrient losses during this time is so important. And so at the sub-watershed scale, it's really important to understand trends and changes over time. So on the next slide, I wanted to say kind of alongside this, so we look at the sub-watershed scale to get an idea of what's happening long term. But if we want to start to tease out the effectiveness of practices, we really need to look at the edge of field scale or the field scale. So in Upper Medway, there's the controlled drainage field. So controlled drainage uses a water control structure to hold back water in the field. It's mainly seen as a yield benefit by holding back water during the growing season for crops to use when water is otherwise not available. Agriculture Agri-Food Canada is doing the research at this field, and they're looking at it from a water quality perspective. So the research to date on controlled drainage in terms of how effective it can be on water quality has been done during the growing season. And I just alluded to the fact that most of our nutrients are during the non-growing season. So Agriculture Agri-Food Canada is monitoring year round to try to get at that picture as well. And Upper Thames has worked on the installation and design of this project and continues to partner with Agriculture Agri-Food Canada as they manage the project. And I did want to highlight, I'll just say the number of events, field tours, workshops that had been hosted in the Upper Medway with the assistance of landowners who speak on lessons learned, their experiences, and on occasion offer their dry sheds when we have field tours in the middle of winter. But the participation of these landowners at our events really strengthens and validates the funding that's been put towards the projects in this sub-watershed. And the work in the Upper Medway has really allowed us to advocate for projects and funding elsewhere in the watershed using the model of the Upper Medway in terms of how we can effectively implement a project across a large number of acres. On the next slide, I did just want to touch on the fact that I recognize not everyone in the watershed in Lucan Biddulph lives in the Upper Medway. So just talking very briefly, if I can, on our stewardship programs and other funding that we have for stewardship across the watershed within Lucan Biddulph. So we have a tree planting program, so anything over 2.5 acres. As soon as you hit 500 seedlings, we have funding available. We have funding for large stock tree planting. I say grants may be available. So typically we fund more the restoration type projects where seedlings might not be an appropriate use because they won't survive. So around wetlands for riparian plantings. And then we also have trees for purchase that landowners can purchase seedlings and large stock to plant on their own. I will say that our tree numbers have been relatively low in Lucan. Of course, we want to find ways to increase these numbers, but also recognizing that we are battling increasing land prices. Typically, we do a few windbreaks a year. So naturally, the tree planting numbers are just going to be lower because windbreaks have lower plantings comparative to maybe larger land retirement projects. But right now we really do have great grants for tree planting. So I think it is an opportunity to encourage landowners to plant trees. Yep.
Sorry, do we have, I know that we talked about this before. Do we apply for these grants? Do you do those grants?
We
Because
apply.
this is something we have talked about before, about the, I can't remember the name of the program. That that was it, yes. So I was just, because I know that's been an issue about getting more trees. And I didn't know, so I just saw that. I just wanted to jump on that to see who actually applies for that and how do we do it? So.
Yeah, so for, if I may, for these programs, that's funding that we would apply to. Often, if it's like a federal program, for example, municipalities can be eligible, so it is an option, but that's something that we apply to, often leveraging funds that we get now through Category 3 programs for our stewardship work. No problem. On the next slide, I just wanted to highlight, oops, other way. I'll say a feel-good story. So we did a lot of recent coverage on I'll say the rediscovery of the black red horse, which is a species at risk in Fish Creek. So it was the first time in 20 years it was recorded, and part of Lucan Biddulph does drain into Fish Creek. So the Thames River is one of the few rivers in Canada where this species is found. So it means that if we're finding them in the tributaries, that's just a testament to increasing habitat where they can survive. So good news story. And with that, on the next slide, we actually have funding available through species at risk funding. That dollar figure is not all for Lucan Biddulph because there's species at risk elsewhere through our watershed, but it just allows us to fund projects that we have historically funded through the Clean Water Program, for example, on erosion control projects, so tree planting, erosion control structures, but also we've included cover crops through this funding program. So anything within 5 kilometers of critical habitat for species at risk or distribution for species of concern, that actually allows us to cover a large part of Lucan Biddulph within the Upper Thames watershed. Yeah, so supporting projects where we don't otherwise have funding to do so. And on the next slide, so for example, cover crops that I had just mentioned, we have gotten money to fund outside of the Upper Medway project, 330 acres since 2021. So this is a program that I'm working to build. So besides no-till and conservation tillage or perennial crops, I really do think that cover crops are an effective means to reduce soil erosion, and really land management being the foundation of all stewardship programs. And then also re-highlighting some of the work that we partnered on around erosion control structures in particular. So implementing 25 water and sediment control basins as part of a natural infrastructure solution on the Blake Drain a number of years ago. So that just really speaks to, and we use it to highlight the importance of partnerships in drainage work to, like OMAFRA, for example, whose interest, I'll say, in green infrastructure. So whether that's erosion control structures, wetlands, riparian plantings on municipal drains incorporated under the Drainage Act is increasing. So I think there is potential to continue partnerships such as this one moving forward. And then in terms of partnerships, I did want to highlight all of the partnerships in Lucan Biddulph. I bolded the ones that were specific to the Upper Medway, but I mean, a number of other partners on projects over the years for stewardship, adoption, and research. In terms of what's next, Tree Power Fall 2024. So we're looking forward to partnering with Lucan Biddulph and Asable Bayfield on that program. Agriculture Agri-Food Canada is continuing to monitor the controlled drainage site. It is part of the on-farm program with Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association, looking at the impacts of BMPs on water quality and soil health parameters at the edge of field. So that's working with Upper Thames in partnership with Agriculture Agri-Food Canada on that project. In terms of the Upper Medway outlet, the University of Waterloo is interested in continuing monitoring there as part of their research, and that helps us bridge the gap, I'll say, until we know what the long-term future of the Upper Medway is going to be. And then, of course, just general stewardship projects with landowners across Lucan Biddulph. So that is all I have, but I did want to say thank you for supporting stewardship in Lucan Biddulph.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. It's great to get an update on what is happening. Comments from council, or if there's any questions from the presentation. Councillor Hodgins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the Upper Medway watershed or sub-watershed, watershed. I know the ABCA does watershed report cards, and they sort of score it based on like water quality, trees, and things like that. Does UTRCA do that as well? And if you do, I guess what is the general score or the health of this watershed?
Yes, if I may answer, Madam Mayor. So we do sub-watershed report cards for all of our sub-watersheds. So the Medway would have a watershed report card that's produced every 5 years. The water quality data from that is a little bit further down in the watershed. The work that's being done in the Upper Medway is included as part of, I'll say, pilot, like side projects, but our data doesn't actually go into the watershed report cards. All of that is streamlined across the province, so it's located from a site further down in the Medway. I want to say it might be a D, but I don't know off the top of my head what the actual watershed rate is for Medway. Yeah.
Okay. Another question. I think like we've seen it in our in our official plan, and I guess through these report cards, just the lack of tree canopy or just trees in general in our municipality. And I guess what are some things aside from the tree power program, maybe one opportunity where we can try to increase canopy, but I guess are there other opportunities that we can pursue with the assistance of UTRCA to help improve our overall canopy?
Yeah, so the tree power program is is great because residents aren't eligible in terms of the size of their property for our tree planting programs because we do require having 2.5 acres. So that's one way. And then for rural landowners who do meet that 2.5 acre, I'll say promoting the fact that we have been funding up to 90% of total project costs. And that's something that we're hoping is going to continue over the next couple of years while we have good grants for tree planting programs. So yeah, I would just say like advocacy that there is funding available, and we try to keep the paperwork very minimal. So it's, I think, a relatively simple process, but there's also, so there's our programs, but then there's also programs through the Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association. They often have tree planting as one of their categories within potentially one or two of their programs that come up at various times of the year. So there's funding opportunities available for tree planting. Yeah. I don't know if that answered your question or not. Sorry.
Yeah, that helps. Thanks you. My last question, you talked about BMPs. And can you just explain what BMPs are generally and which BMPs are being targeted for adoption here?
Yeah, certainly. So, sorry, I use an acronym in my everyday life and I forget to explain it sometimes. So, BMP, best management practice. So that's anything that's going to improve water quality, reduce soil erosion, all without having a negative impact on the farm, I'll say. So typically within the Upper Thames, some of our popular projects would be cover crop. So putting something on after your main crop to provide ground cover over the winter. Tree planting is our popular program. So windbreaks, for example, block plantings. So retiring parcels of land that are not profitable. Erosion control structures. So building a berm to reduce erosion upstream so that you'll see a lot of cuts through fields sometimes. So we encourage putting a berm upstream so that you're reducing downstream erosion. We do get a lot of interest in wetland creation. So again, just another option for retiring unprofitable pieces of land. Those are probably the big ones.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Deputy Mayor Manders.
I'm just curious, do you know the percentage of funding then that you're in our jurisdiction that goes towards the lands that are in our area?
Yes, Madam Mayor. In terms of how it compares to everything, I don't know. I can say, like, through the funding just for the Upper Medway alone, it was over $2 million.
Yeah,
in
more
terms of
talking
funding.
about just interesting, like the tree planting and the different things you talk about there on that, that sort of stuff that's 90% funded. I'm just kind of curious again on something like that, or if, again, and I don't, I'm just curious, the percentage of land from Upper Thames within Lucan Biddulph, is that like 10%?
Okay.
So I'm just kind of curious on that and then how that relates to a project like tree planting. That's all, percentage. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would
Or in the
say,
future, just, yeah.
sorry, I would say for tree planting, we probably plant on average 2% of all of our trees go to Lucan Biddulph. So if we are funding 100% of the projects, we would 2% of that would be going towards projects in Lucan Biddulph. Of the cover crop funding, for example, it's been a relatively small pot of funding. So although it was 330 acres, which doesn't seem like a lot on the grand scheme of things, it was probably about 10% of the overall funding across the watershed was going towards Lucan Biddulph.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I don't have a good sense comparatively for Lucan Biddulph.
And do you know how many acre, then what percentage we are though to the watershed, like to the whole, to the Upper Thames?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I am unsure.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious on the, percentages of how much we're taking advantage of a funding compared to our farm, compared to the land that's in it. Obviously, they're very firm numbers. Obviously, it's a percentage is a percentage. So I'd be curious on a future report, I just love to know, that it's 2% of getting the tree planting might be great because we're 3%, that's all I'm saying. I'm just kind of, 4% of the lands might only be within our, within our area. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and
I'm just kinda curious. That's all.
that's definitely something we can look into, especially as we're entering into category 3 program agreements and we'll be reporting back on those on an annual basis. So that's something that we could look into as a metric.
Yeah, that's all.
reportable.
And then also then promoting it within our area too, maybe more so, or not, that, obviously you guys would do a great job at it, because and again, maybe there's only, and nowadays the departments are so big anymore, might only be 10, 20 people. I don't even know how many would fall within that as far as, rate payers. So, yeah, so.
All right, no, I appreciate the feedback.
Okay, any other comments or questions on the presentation? Seeing none, thank you for joining us today.
thank you for
That
having
was
me.
good. Appreciated the update and we look forward to seeing you again, hopefully with more updates. And I know that like this year or this term, our representative on the Upper Thames Board is from Thames Centre. So I imagine that he'll be able to report back when the category 3s are brought back for an update as to where we are. But thanks very much for joining us. It was great to see you. Yeah. Yeah. So 0.3%. So it's 0.3% of the whole deputy mayor. It's 0.3%
Okay.
of the whole Upper Thames
Yeah.
that is in Lucan Biddulph. Yeah, it's very small. Yep.
And that'd be neat to. That'd be, no, that's good. And then it'd be, just on the tree planting and all that, if it's
Mhm.
3%, 2%, then we're actually higher than our, percent.
Yeah.
That's all. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Okay. With that, I'd ask for a mover and a seconder to just receive that for information, please. Councillor Regan and Councillor Hodgins, all in favor, and that's carried. Okay, we'll move on to the minutes. We've got the minutes from March 5th in front of us, and if nothing needs to be amended, I would ask for a mover and a seconder to approve those as circulated. Councillor Westman and Councillor Hodgins, all in favor? And that's carried. Business arising from the minutes, nothing has been added. Did council want anything from the previous set of minutes added? Okay, then we will move on to correspondence. There was a number of items that were received from in the last 2 weeks. Nothing's been pulled. I believe Councillor Hodgins wanted to speak to one of the items, though.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to draw my colleagues' attention to item number 5, the resolution from the city of Quinte West for housing funding. And I would like to move a motion to support their resolution. And just to give a quick highlight or overview of their resolution, is similar to other smaller municipalities. They're facing some high capital infrastructure costs for major projects they have to do, and they're having financial difficulty making those projects happen. So just to maybe highlight what they resolved in their resolution, they are calling on the federal government to reevaluate their lack of funding for municipalities with a population less than 50,000 in rural Ontario, to make available funding for infrastructure programs to help build infrastructure to help build much needed new homes. They're also calling on the province of Ontario to invest more than the currently allocated $200 million into the Housing Enabling Water Systems Fund. So those are the two main items. They are calling on the federal government and provincial government. So I would, with the support of members of council, I'd like to move a motion to support this resolution.
Okay, thank you very much. If I could get a seconder to that, Councillor Regan, is there any discussion on that or any comment on what Councillor Hodgins has brought forth? Okay, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Counselor Hodgins for that. Were there any other items that council wanted to be pulled? I might just make note of the return of the Ontario West Municipal Conference on October 25th. You'll recall that years ago, we had a conference that would be hosted in October, November. It was hosted by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. And then I think that stopped in 2018. But the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus is bringing it back. So you might just want to mark that in your calendar and consider attending that. With that, I would ask for a mover and a seconder to approve, or just to approve those for information, accept those for information, receive those. Deputy or Councillor Regan and Councillor Hodgins, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. On to committee reports. Blue Water. Anything from Blue Water?
Nothing from, we got a meeting Thursday.
Okay. Anything from CEDC?
Nothing as a meeting, but just wanted to remind people that tomorrow night we have our rescheduled small business marketing session here tomorrow night at 6:30.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lake Huron, we did have a meeting last week, and this is maybe more for Ron and maybe Tina, but I think more Ron, and Jeff would be interested in this. So you'll recall a number of years ago, Lake Huron and the Elgin Board were looking for essentially a definition of what they were, as were they a corporation or a joint municipal services board. And there was a committee that was struck to analyze that. A legal opinion was given to the board, and it's going to be circulated back to administration. And I think what will happen is that working group or recommending committee will be restruck again. And I think that there's some movement that will handle that we'll see. And it will come back to each municipality. As a reminder, there will be a motion needed from this council. So there'll be education and there'll be a whole background, but I'll look for updates to start coming on that again in the next little bit. Fire boards, the Lucan Fire Board has a meeting this Thursday. ABCA.
We will be meeting this Thursday afternoon, followed by partner appreciation event.
Parks and Recreation, anything?
I have nothing to report to council this time, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. On to staff reports. Ron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The late addition to the agenda before council tonight is in regard to an exemption request. It's a single source procurement for the Biddulph Blanchard Fire Area Board. They have a number of air packs that they wish to purchase. And because I believe they're an MSA brand, I look to Alex to correct me on that one. I believe they're MSA brand and they're interchangeable with the existing ones in Lucan Biddulph and the ones that St. Mary's uses as well. And the supplier AJ Stone we've used them for a number of firefighting pieces of equipment. They are the authorized dealer. Each dealer has their protected area, so there's really only one place to get these. And according to the Township of Lucan Biddulph policy number 100-55-2019, if a single source supply is in excess of $20,000, council approval is required, hence bringing this report to this meeting tonight. So the cost of the purchase is, I think I've included in there, yes, $181,708.52. That includes HST. We do get a portion of that HST back. So that is the gross cost, not the net cost. But the purchase price will be paid out of the board's reserve account, and the current balance in the reserve account is $505,371.31. So the recommendation is that the report be received for information, and further that the council grant
or that council grant a single source exemption under the provisions of the township procurement policy number 100-55-2019 for the purpose of purchasing air packs in the amount of $181,708.52, including HST for the Biddulph Blanchard fire area.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Ron. Any questions or clarifications, comments on this report? Councillor Regan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ron, I'm just wondering, how many air packs are we buying here?
Sorry, through the mayor to Councillor Regan. I believe there are 10 air packs, but I believe everybody had to get individual air masks. So they have to fit to each person.
Well, they're, okay, so they're.
So everybody has to have their own mask,
Okay. No,
but they bought 10 complete air packs.
Right, okay, no, thank you. I just had not seen this request before, like it was just sort of, so I was just checking. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Westman?
Yeah, and I think it should be noted in here that the new air packs are what they consider high pressure, so the bottles hold over 4,000 pounds pressure. Whereas the old bottles were 2,000 pounds pressure, and they're no longer compatible with the system that, like Lucan Biddulph Fire Department and the St. Mary's Fire Department, these will all be compatible with each other. So when we do a joint firefight or scene, everybody would be able to interchange so that there would be better compatibility. The old packs are obviously have a lifespan that has to be considered as well. So I think that's something to clarify, that these are a higher pressure bottle and require and the Lucan Biddulph Fire Department has the proper filling equipment to service those bottles as well. So.
Deputy Mayor Manager?
Yeah, my concern is more in the single source procurement. This is a product line I sold a year and a half ago. So I find it, AJ Stone's out of Concord, that they have jurisdiction over Lucan. And as far as MSA goes, they will control the distributors to whatever standard the fire department needs for quality and for everything else. They all have to hold the same standard. I think this should have went through the canoe process. I think our CAO should confirm that, this also concerns me as, again, selling similar product lines in the past, not now. To me, why we'd ever select a monopoly then that we cannot get a second price on is concerning to me. When I read this, that if that's the case, that could have been twice the price from what I'm reading, because we got nothing to compare it to. So one, we should never get a commodity item that's a single source. Two, I can't believe that a Concord distributor has got jurisdiction over Lucan. And we've been talking about the canoe process, and I think we need to let everyone know about it. So those are my comments.
Did you want to comment on anything, Ron, and follow up to that? I know.
Madam Mayor, this kind of came late to us, so I'm kind of trying to pick up the pieces here. So, yeah, suffice it to say, the process will be different.
There has been quite an education process taken since this, so leave it at that. Councillor Hodge?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question was just going to be, did this come about kind of through the fire master plan review and those recommendations, or is this kind of separate from that process? Or
So this had to happen regardless. And I think the fact that these are interchangeable with the Lucan Biddulph ones, I think the fire services master plan is probably irrelevant as far as this purchase goes, because we do need them regardless of what the final outcome of the fire services master plan is.
and just maybe further to the deputy mayor's comments, just with this coming in kind of quick, and is it something that's very time sensitive that we really need to get on this right away and go ahead with this single source procurement? Or through you to staff, could we potentially look at deferring this and just double checking and seeing if there are opportunities for another procurement process, whether it's through Canoe or just looking at pricing.
I wish I had a better answer for you, Councillor Hodgins. But I think, as the mayor alluded to, there was a process issue here. I think we've dealt with that process and this is not going to happen again. But I don't have a good answer for you. And suffice it to say, I don't think anybody sitting around this table was too happy with the way this came forward. But again, it's a lesson. They've learned the lesson and we will be better the next go around. That doesn't answer your question. Yeah, I'm not happy with it. But
To follow up to that, did this come through, I guess, the fire board committee meetings and then, you know, this is what's being recommended through the committee to council currently?
correct. This did come through. We did talk about the purchase of these things at the November meeting. There was a little bit of misunderstanding as to, they thought they had approval to move forward on this and there was no formal motion to move forward. So when it came to us, it kind of became larger than life and we had some process issues.
Great, I'm good for now.
Councillor Reagan?
So I'm gonna have to say, I'm a little concerned about that. And I'm wondering with, to Councillor Hodgins' point about deferring this into getting another quote.
So they did get two quotes.
Okay, sorry, I didn't know.
Yeah,
that.
they
sorry.
did get two quotes and
That was-
one was $45,000 more than what is.
All right,
But then I think through the conversation to what the deputy mayor said, then they were told that only AJ Stone had the jurisdiction anyways. The other company wouldn't have honored it anyways, even if it had been a competitive bid.
may I ask another question, Madam Mayor? Just, I'm not sure, maybe to Ron. So was there another alternative besides that other company? I'm just concerned that, and I understand what's going on, but I'm just concerned that there wasn't any other bidding, I guess, is what I'm asking, is that I know the other company was higher, but was there a third company or a fourth company? I don't know. So I'm just wondering if because that process, it seems like the process was, if I can use, was circumvented. And I'm just concerned about that. And just to speak into that, I'm just wondering whether it should be deferred and this should be looked at again by staff.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I totally understand the comment. And again, it was a, a very good discussion we had that this is not the way we do things. And I think, like I said, going forward, it will be different. It will be different. I don't know at the end of the day whether we'd be in a different position even if we went through the proper channels. And that's, I will say that I think we might end up at the same spot, but the process of getting to there was not good. So that was the point that was made at the fire board meeting.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to ask a clarification on the jurisdiction item and, I guess I just don't understand that exactly how one company, I guess, has jurisdiction and they're the only vendor that can sell this product. Is that correct? Or could that just be explained to us?
Yeah, I don't think I'm the right person to answer that question, to tell you the truth, Counselor. I don't know. I can't answer that.
Okay. I guess the more I'm hearing about it, I'm just maybe just kind of raising more questions and it's kind of, I'm not entirely comfortable moving ahead. So I guess my next question is just, we're keep going around in circles around the potential deferral. What are the implications of deferring this? And, if we deferred this to our next meeting, what does that look like for us?
I would like to make the motion. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Madam Mayor, I would like to make the motion that we defer this until the next meeting. We get further information and clarification.
You know, I'll second that with a comment when I'm right, when you're ready.
Yeah, that's fine. So motion from Councillor Regan to defer this item, seconded by Deputy Mayor Manders. Comment.
And just again, even having a second quote at that much higher, an MSA distributor wouldn't quote if they didn't have jurisdiction. So, and again, Lucan Biddulph, I'd be surprised again with Granger and Fastenal and these companies, yeah, there's just a company out of Concord. And again, the standards set for these products is the same. So, you know, MSA dealers, whether one's favorable or not, all have to, you know, give exactly what the fire department needs. So whether, or you're not a dealer. But anyways, just this point, I agree with CAO, we're maybe back here where we are or where we would have been. I just, again, it needs to be a learning process. I think the canoe supplier, I just think that's a good tool to bounce, you know, things off that are a certain parameter in dollars. But I think deferring it just to get our heads around this for the future vote, then that'd be good. So.
Okay, any other further comment? Councillor Hodgins?
Yeah, just know that I guess I'm supportive of this deferral, and when it does come back to council, you know, I think we've given enough comments. I'd like to just get a better understanding of some of those items around jurisdiction and as well as, you know, the procurement and the options and whether the canoe program is applicable.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? So the motion on the floor is to defer this item to the next council meeting, which time more information will be brought back. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Did you have anything verbal, Ron, or anything? Nope. No building, no financing, planning. I know, Dan, you wanted to speak to one of the bylaws that we will be discussing.
Through the chair, thanks, Madam Mayor, members of council. So just as a note to council, so an item was added to the agenda today. It's the bylaw, the implementing bylaw for a zoning bylaw amendment, which was technically approved in principle on October 17th, 2023 by council. And this relates to the property that's located in Clandeboye for self-storage. So this is ZBA 1/2022. And just to bring everything back to everyone's mindset, it was a zoning bylaw amendment to add a self-storage use to a site-specific farm commercial exception zone, that being the C3-6 zone with a holding symbol. And the relaxations sought there within was to add the use, to increase the maximum lot coverage from 35 to 45%, to reduce the minimum front yard setback to 4 meters, and then to reduce the interior side yard setback to 3 meters. So again, this was voted on in principle at that October meeting. This is just that implementing bylaw that is now being brought forward. The applicant has satisfied the initial condition that they provide a satisfactory reference plan to us that has been deposited at the land registry's office now. So it's just that final step to get the zoning in place. So thank you, and available to answer any questions as you may have.
And any questions or clarifications on that? Councillor Hodgins?
Thanks. I was just gonna note, I believe when this was reported to council previously, I did disclosure of pecuniary interest just because it was about the water servicing and that through the municipality of North Middlesex. So if it's appropriate to abstain on the bylaw, if that could be read separately, if that's appropriate. Thanks.
Yeah, we can do that. Sorry, I had my mic off. We can do that. And then Tina will make note of the conflict. Any other comments? Okay, moving on. Anything from Public Works, Jeff?
Yes, Madam Mayor, just wanted to touch base on, there is a motion coming up later in the agenda. I just wanted to mention to council that the Whitfield drain, there is an issue in the town of Lucan. The Whitfield is a drain that runs through Lucan and it meets up with the bend over about Beach Street. Over around Dutchess Ave, there is a washout or we're having some issues on a private property in there. So in discussion with the property owner and with what could be done over there, it needs to be an update to the report to correct the erosion problem that's happening on this property. So that's where this is going. It's a confined area that's going to be looked at. It's 109 Dutchess Ave area, in that area. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Nothing from Parks and Recreation, anything from Economic Development? No. On to councillor comments. Oh, did you have anything for Economic Development? Sorry, no? Okay. Councillor comments, Councillor Westman.
Yeah, I just wanted to let everybody know that there will be a pop-up market at the Lucan Scout Guide Hall on Saturday, starting at 9 a.m. It's a little fundraiser for scouts and guides, and there'll be multiple vendors there selling all kinds of different things. And I would sure love to see you. So that's it.
Great, thank you for that. Any other councillor comments? So last night, Councillor Regan and I had the pleasure to attend the Lucan Lions Club meeting. And first of all, I want to congratulate the Lions Club on the festivities on Saturday night or Saturday for St. Patrick's Day. It was a great, fun run and walk with over 300 participants. I think they had 290 some odd registered, but then a number of people just participated. So that was great. The afternoon was wonderful. They had a dance in the evening, and it was in support of a family that has got some health issues that that they're facing, and I understand that it was well attended. So congratulations to all that were involved on Saturday. Councillor Regan and I were invited to the Lions Club dinner last night, and they presented proceeds of their fish fry to Sari, the VON, and the Elsa Craig Food Bank. So that was great. And they also presented us with a check to go towards the arena project for $50,000. So they have now donated $150,000 to the project. There is a potential, bit of a challenge has been laid to the fundraising committee that we can raise some more money, that they will match it up to a certain dollar amount. So we just really want to thank the Lions. As I said last night, I say all the time, I don't know where the community would be without the Lions Club. We depend on them so much. They support very visibly to campaigns such as this, but then they also quietly support families in need and have been able to help some young athletes in our community. And they always seem to find where there's a need and to be able to support it through their fundraising efforts. It's a great group. There's been a number of new members that they've had, and I would say that they challenge us all to be better citizens for our community. They show what it really does mean to give back to a community that you live in. So I want to thank the Lions Club for that, and we certainly look forward to continuing to work with them. There are no changes to budget, any notices of motion. Then we'll move into our motions. We've got the accounts paid in front of us, and that the Council of the Township of Lucan Biddulph receive the attached accounts as paid for information as follows. And that's for February 2024, $543,748.04. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Hodgins and Councillor Westman, all in favor? And that's carried. That council authorized Daniel Regan to attend the 2024 OSAM Conference in Aurelia from May 1st to 3rd at a registration cost of $600 plus HST. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Westman and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor? And that's carried. And then the motion to appoint the engineer for the Whitfield Drain, that Township of Lucan Biddulph appoint Spreet Associates London Limited under Section 4 or 78 of the Drainage Act to prepare a drainage report for the requested work to the Whitfield Drain, subject to the required 30 days notice to the applicable Conservation Authority. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Hodgins, all in favor? And that's carried. We have 3 bylaws in front of us. So the first one is bylaw 200-2024, being a bylaw to amend the Lucan Biddulph comprehensive zoning. Okay, before I read that, so I should read each motion like that, right? Because I'm going to pull this one.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so we're gonna do this in 3 stages then. So bylaw 200-2024 being a bylaw to amend the Lucan Biddulph comprehensive zoning bylaw for 108 Main Street. So if no one cares to speak to that bylaw on its first, second, and third reading, it be considered to have been read a first time and passed, read a second time and passed, and read a third time and passed. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Hodgins, all in favor? And that's carried. Then bylaw 201-2024, being a bylaw to amend the Lucan Biddulph comprehensive zoning bylaw for 34378 Bradley Street. And if no one cares to speak to that bylaw on its first and second and third reading, that it be considered to have been read a first time and passed, read a second time and passed, and read a third time and passed. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Regan and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor? And that's carried. And then bylaw 14-2024 to adopt and confirm all actions and proceedings of tonight's council meeting. So if no one cares to speak to this bylaw on its first, second, and third reading, it be considered to have been read a first time and passed, read a second time and passed, and read a third time and passed. A mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Westman and Councillor Hodgins, all in favor? And that's carried. And resolved that the council meeting be adjourned at 7:48. A mover and a seconder, Councillor Regan and Deputy Mayor Manders, all in favor. And that's carried. Thank you very much.